Support for the BTPM NPR What's Next podcast comes from Health Foundation for Western and Central New York, partnering with the community to pursue racial and socioeconomic health equity. Learn more at hfwcny.org.
From Buffalo Toronto Public Media, this is What's Next, an hour dedicated to amplifying the voices of marginalized and underrepresented communities across Western New York and Southern Ontario.
We cannot erase, we cannot reform, we cannot make things better if we're uncomfortable having tough conversations,
Absolutely.
if we're uncomfortable talking about race.
What's Next carries forward our mission to engage in meaningful conversations about race, equity, and the shared concerns that deeply affect Buffalo's East Side and beyond.
Don't stop. Make those families part of your life. Their lives are part of yours. Don't stop.
Together, we dive into the real issues, striving for understanding, connection, and change.
In the suburban area, everywhere, we must work and teach our children.
Good morning and welcome to another episode of What's Next. I'm executive producer Charles Gilbert. This episode is our producer picks, where we highlight 3 standout conversations heard on previous episodes. First, we revisit Jay Moran's conversation with Executive Director of UB's Educational Opportunity Center, Ben Hilligas. The two discussed the 60th anniversary of the program, success stories that include a formerly incarcerated person who completed the pre-apprentice program, and other programs EOC provides to individuals.
The one thing you wanted to mention, this is interesting, this is 60 years since this began.
That's right. We're really excited this year as a system across New York State. There are 10 other EOCs across New York State and all of the upstate cities and all of the boroughs, as well as Long Island and Westchester. And this system grew over the last 6 decades. In 1966, Mr. Arthur O'Eve, legendary Buffalo figure, spearheaded legislation that created the EOC system. And it was a small system at that time. It was Buffalo, Albany, Manhattan, and Brooklyn, the 4 original centers. And over the last 60 years, it's grown and evolved to be this comprehensive opportunity program that offers, thousands of chances for people to improve their situations across New York State. So as a system, we're celebrating that this year. We're really excited about it. We're going to do collaborative events between centers across the state, and each individual center is going to be celebrating this year. So we'll be really leaning into it at our commencement ceremony in May. We're going to have some special guests, we hope, that'll really help tie the history of the EOC to the current times. And I think it's also it's important to remember and note, this legislation passing in 1966 was right in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement. Mm-hmm. And this legislation was a result of and part of the Civil Rights Movement. And it's really a part of history that still exists today. And we're still have the same mission of trying to create more equity in the economic and academic settings for people in Buffalo.
And while, of course, there's been an evolution of the Educational Opportunity Center throughout the years, the mission, how do you describe the mission?
The mission, honestly, it's a little unfortunate. It hasn't changed because circumstances, unfortunately, haven't changed that much, right? I think Mr. Eve created the system. He had a vision where he wanted to be able to create a level playing field, or more level playing field for folks, recognizing that many people in Buffalo and across the state, primarily people of color, did not have the same opportunities as their peers in other demographics. And if you don't have the resources and you don't have the same level of familiar support or social support, you don't have access to the same opportunities. So that's why free educational and vocational training program was the part of his vision and the answer and the solution that he created. So, we want to give people a chance that they didn't have previously in order to get to a point where they can start to really have economic mobility and build a better life and, have it be generational, have, an impact where the children of folks that we serve are then in a better position to have more opportunity as they grow up. And it's the same today as it was 60 years ago, honestly.
We could probably have more than one program, several programs, just talking about some of the different success stories that are coming out of the EOC. But just before we hopped on the air here, you told me that you outlined it. You had at least one person, you told me, that was incarcerated and went through your program and found their way into the trades, and now among the many who are out working, lots of overtime, I'm pretty sure, out at the new Buffalo Bills Stadium. Let's just talk. Give me as much as you can about that story and others.
Yeah, it is not unique. However, it is an incredible story.
Absolutely.
So we talk about this particular individual pretty frequently. Charles from UB Communications is familiar with him. We've done some stories. And again, I just want to emphasize it's not really unique, but it's really special. So that's
Absolutely.
why we talk about this particular individual. But a gentleman, when he came to us, 41 years old, had been incarcerated New York State prison for 17 years at that time, was recently out, young daughter, girlfriend, really trying to establish, some stability in his life and just have a life that he hadn't had the opportunity to have for a considerable amount of time. And somehow he, through our outreach efforts and our recruitment, he learned about our pre-apprenticeship skilled trades program, and with very little information, just kind of showed up. It is Buffalo. It's a small community. So turns out he had some familiarity with our director of enrollment management from growing up. Like they had a connection. So there was some trust that was established at that point, which is, always really important. And I don't think he knew what he was getting into. I can't recall exactly, but he might have been part of our first cohort. So it was a brand new program for us that we were standing up, from the ground up, just completely developed from scratch. So, he was taking as much of a chance on us as we were taking a chance on him. And he got into the program. And I think he just, like so many of our students, he pretty quickly identified the opportunity that was in front of him. Like, wow, this is a real thing, and this might actually be my ticket. So he committed to the program. It's only 7.5 weeks. In that program, we have a very specific curriculum that was developed by the National Building Trades Association specifically to prepare people to be apprentices with skilled trade unions. So it was developed by unions for unions. And it doesn't teach you how to be a welder, it doesn't teach you how to be a pipe fitter or a laborer, but it teaches you how to be an apprentice. It teaches you how to be prepared to take advantage of the opportunity to be an apprentice, get the hard skills, and then become a bona fide union journey person. So he fully embraced the program. He got all the certificates. He got all the credentials. In that program, we have very intentional relationships with the unions. So we basically are able to have a smooth handoff. The students still have to qualify. They still have to, interview. They got to do all the normal steps to get into an apprenticeship, but they're coming from us. So they have credibility. They've got the credentials, so they have credibility, and they generally have an advantage when they go to get into the union. And we've been very successful. Our first year, which was 24-25, we've had 70% of our students actually become union apprentices, which is
70%.
70%. It's an incredibly high success rate. We're extremely proud of it, and it's honest. I could go on. It's the best.
It reflects a couple of things, right? It reflects the need that, and we've had stories on for years about the need in local trades. So now this program is helping to fill that, but also the idea that whatever an individual went through in their life and whatever roads they went on that didn't lead them to success, and sometimes in this particular case, incarceration, that there are opportunities. I think maybe you feel this way. I'll let you clarify for yourself. The idea that there are opportunities for everybody. It's sometimes just matching the
100%.
skills, the talents with those opportunities.
I'd like to come back to the story, but you're absolutely describing exactly what I think, what the EOC is. There is no limit to the amount of chances that a person might need in order to be successful. You know what I mean? And eventually it sticks. People may fail repeatedly, often not for reasons that are beyond their control. And the amount of resilience it takes to keep getting up and trying again and come through the door. You can come to the EOC a half a dozen times and try a GED program. Keep coming. If it doesn't work for whatever reason, keep coming. The seventh time it might stick. Right. It's the resilience that our students demonstrate is incredible, but we are there. We are always there. There's no limit to the amount of chances, I think, because you just never know when the circumstances are going to align and the timing's going to work out and you're going to be successful. So just coming back to that individual real quick, we expose them to all sorts of trades. We have these relationships. We bring the students to the training halls of a handful of unions, and then they get hands-on experience. They get to learn really what this specific trade is about. He identified the Smart 71, which is primarily sheet metal. So they do all the HVAC duct work, that type of stuff, but they weld. So they have a lot of work on the stadium, and he was admitted to that union. almost within a few weeks, started working on the stadium, up on high lifts, hanging hundreds of feet in the air, welding over his head.
Right.
And they love him there. He's a leader in his apprenticeship group, and every student that we place with the unions, and I knew this was our responsibility, was to make sure that we were sending really prepared students, because we also need the credibility that we establish by sending the students, so that the unions know that, okay, this is legit. This is a real program. These people are highly qualified. They care. And it just reinforces the success, right? Because they know they can trust us, and they know we're going to send them great people, which means they take more people, which means we provide more opportunity. And so far, that cycle has really been self-fulfilling, and it's very gratifying for all of us, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, when we talk about stories like that, I feel like I could probably listen to it all the time. I would just really connects that concept of hope with reality, and
100%.
then we can have positive realities in this world.
Let me just add real quick that specific program at the EOC is state funded. We're part of SUNY. We're part of the University of Buffalo. We get all of our funding directly from New York State. We're a state operated facility. But that program is supported by additional funding that we got from New York State, Empire State Development, Office of Strategic Workforce Development. And it was partially their idea. They really wanted to provide more access to underserved communities and increase capacity in the trades and help the unions fill the open roles that they had. And they've been tremendously supportive. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. And we're really grateful for the opportunity. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to expand now also a couple of different ways. Number one, just increasing the capacity of our cohorts. We're serving each class is about 16, 17 people right now. We want to get up maybe 20, 21, maybe even start 2 cohorts simultaneously to be able to serve more people. And we've started having some recent conversations about expanding geographically as well to some surrounding communities, potentially the city of Niagara Falls. That's in its initial phases. It's preliminary, but...
So transportation's
it's a barrier.
I guess it stands to reason, but it is it's an
always
issue.
A barrier, especially in the trades. And I know our time is limited, so I don't want to talk only about this program, but transportation is always a barrier for our students. Trades, it's even more pronounced because it's not point A to point B every day. Right. The jobs are everywhere. The jobs are in Orchard Park. The jobs are in Lewiston. The jobs are all over. They're in Batavia, and you have to potentially get to a different job site in a different region of Western New York every single day. We have a relationship with West Her, and we have a couple of students who have worked with West Her, gotten some one-on-one attention, got a little bit of credit flexibility. We've worked with our students on financial literacy, and we've gotten a few students behind the wheel of new cars in our partnership with West Her, which is really, unfortunately, the only solution to the transportation problem generally, but specifically with the trades, because there's no public transportation option that's going to get you to a job site in Batavia. So recognizing that's a barrier, we've been really working hard to try to find solutions and getting our students, in some cases like 21, 22-year-old young people, behind the wheel of their first car that's affordable, that's reliable, that's going to get them to their job, which is now a career that's going to earn them 6 figures in not too long. It's amazing.
Well, as a son of a person who was in the trades for almost 50 years, I know I can say off the top of my head, I can say my father worked at just about every place in downtown Buffalo. West Valley, he worked in Pittsburgh, and those are just on the top of it. So yeah, mobility is important, that's for sure. Let's just take one quick moment for outreach, and we can obviously get back to this, but if somebody is hearing about what you're talking about, and we actually have only kind of focused on one element of it, what's the best way to go?
Yes. So our website is the best way to reach us. Okay. We have kind of a main front door, single point of access, which is our application. You can call anytime, but if you just Google Buffalo EOC, you'll find us. Also, the website is www.buffalo.edu/EOC. Very easy way to find us. You'll find information on all of our programs. Pretty easy to navigate website. That application, it's the front door. Once you fill that out, you're going to hear from us, and we're not going to let you go until we determine exactly what it is that you need. So because we have programs that are outside of our doors too. We have a GED program at Northland. We have a new program serving youth in the North Towns in Lancaster. And just making sure that people understand that the application is that's the best place to start.
Sure.
If you fill that out, if we get your contact information, then someone from our admissions team is going to be calling you within 24 hours and figuring out how we can help.
And as the son of a person who was in the trades and found out the hard way that he could not follow his father's footsteps, you have other programs other than the trades, of course, and that are actually almost kind of like the staples, for lack of a better term, of the Educational Opportunity Center. Yeah,
we're really glad that we're in the trades now. It was one of the things that I really wanted to accomplish when I came in. For a while, been known primarily for our allied health programs, right. Which we're very proud of also, and that we've been able to expand recently. But traditionally more attractive to women, more women filling those roles. So our student population demographics, we're skewing pretty heavily female, which is fine, again, but we want to be able to provide opportunities for men as well. So we got into the trades. We've also really been able to expand our commercial driver's license program and enhance that recently. We have men in the allied health programs, and we have women in both trades and CDL. But again, generally speaking, right. they lean one way or the other. Our CDL program, we just enrolled 17 students this January, which prior to that we were seeing 5 or 6. We really wanted to emphasize it. And one of the things that we're most excited about is we now have a partnership with Stevens Driving School. So our part of the program is classroom-based. It's theoretical. It gives the students everything that they need to know in order to get their CDL permit. They go down, they get their CDL permit. We pay for the application fee. We do all of that. Once they get their permit, they come back to us. We have a state-of-the-art CDL driving simulator, which is this enormous contraption. It would fill up half of this room. 3 immersive giant LCD screens. It's got the double clutch. It's got the seat. The seat rumbles. It's a very expensive video game, but it gives you a lot of really, really significant behind-the-wheel training without actually being behind the wheel. So we put them through a 2-week simulation course, and then we send them to Stevens, where they get the hours that they need behind the wheel, and then Stevens takes them to their driving test and gets them their CDL. So from start to finish, we're recruiting people off the street with limited experience, and then once they have a commercial driver's license, that is the ultimate credential that, again, unlocks an entire career. And there's such high demand in that industry that folks get a job almost immediately, starting, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, and then the sky's the limit from there. So we're very proud of that program also.
That was Ben Hilligas, Executive Director of UB's Educational Opportunity Center. Next, we revisit EJ Cecile's conversation with education advocate Jessica Bauer and community leader Sam Radford. The three discussed the validation of their advocacy efforts by the recent Attorney General's findings into suspension practices in the Buffalo public school system. They discussed the importance of understanding root causes of behavior and the necessities of systemic changes to create a more supportive educational environment.
I'm interested in learning what, if anything, surprised you about the AG's findings, and what either confirmed or validated what you've already been concerned about.
Well, I will start with it was a validation. Just the AOD in itself was a validation. We've been advocating on this issue since 2010, so to finally get to a place where the things that parents have been saying, the things that parents have been experiencing have been, acknowledged, and, a plan has put together to hold the district accountable for complying with the law.
Yeah, I would echo what Sam is saying, just the validation, because a lot of times we've raised issues and have been told that it's not true. Our experience is not actually happening. Been working on this for a little bit less time than Sam, but a long time. And then my own daughter got suspended as well 4 years ago, and it just took me into a rabbit hole kind of, and all the students that we've worked with, all the families. There was nothing that was necessarily surprising, but just reading through all of those pages, detailing out, really in black and white and legal language, and that a thorough investigation was conducted, the numbers that were out there, the things that we had said, was encouraging to see, right? It's been hard work. We never were sure if it was going to get validated, and we would actually have a assurance of discontinuance, as the Attorney General's office calls it. So we're feeling really encouraged that all these years of work and a lot of sacrifices that parents, students, and advocates have made have got us across this really key threshold.
And if I could add one other thing, we kind of get the information anecdotally. You know, we hear about the real situations that's happening to actual parents and students, but to see it written and just how stark, you know, and just really, you know, the good job the Attorney General did just capturing just the outright, you know, violations and the impact of them. It was really, you know, it really grabbed you. It was like, wow, you know, I mean, so we really happy with the work that the Attorney General did to really validate what, you know, parents have been experiencing.
Yes, and to your point, the stories are impactful, but to see that in black and white, it certainly makes it that much more important to realize what a dire situation this is about how our school district has been handling disciplinary actions. Before we get into the AG's report a little bit more, because you both speak from personal experience, I would love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds and how you got into this work and exactly where that validation comes from and what you've seen in this report as you've explained it.
Yeah, so I've been part of the District Parent Coordinating Council since 2006, and I remember in 2007 actually is the first time we actually had a community forum on suspension. 1,700 kids had got suspended in 1 month.
Wow!
And so we had started advocating on it, but then in 2010, June of 2010, a young man, Jawan Daniels, was caught in a hallway sweep at school. And he was illegally suspended. He was suspended for something he should not have been suspended for. And when he was suspended and sent home without nobody communicating to his parents, he was just sent home out of the building. He was at the bus stop and was shot and killed at the bus stop. And, you know, that was really a turning point for us as parents and parent leaders, understanding that, you know, these unjust suspensions, these suspensions that shouldn't be taking place, was a matter of life and death for our children. And we just could not, you know, continue to sit by and let the district, you know, just do suspensions the way they were suspending students. And so we began to advocate, you know, in 2010. And so it went through many phases. I'm sure we'll cover through the course of the show. But ultimately, you know, another really important point in that process was the Education Trust did a policy brief called Stolen Time, you know, where they captured, you know, where Buffalo is one of the leading districts in suspension in the state. And so that's at that point we were able to get the Attorney General involved and really start to move the dial on making sure that Jawan Daniels' death wasn't in vain, that he died, but we would make changes to prevent that from happening to other children. And ultimately, we didn't expect it to take this long, but, you know, ultimately we believe we got to a place where now it's going to be much more difficult for that type of suspension to take place.
And I got involved a little while after that. You know, my children were very small at that time, and you get involved and you start advocating based on your own experience. You know, at that point, I remember my daughter was in kindergarten and she was acting up in her kindergarten class. And when I talked to the teacher about it, she said, you know, she can't sit down. She's just moving and like not staying in her seat. And I said, okay, well, when is recess? And she said, we don't have recess in kindergarten. I said, well, when is gym class? And she said, oh, they only get gym class once a week. So that was one of the beginning campaigns that I had is, you know, understanding the root causes of why children are, quote unquote, acting out, right? My daughter not being able to sit in her seat as a 5-year-old wasn't because she didn't know how to listen or follow the rules. It was because she was a normal, healthy 5-year-old who needed to move, right? And
it's not unheard of.
We had to do a whole campaign to get recess back in the schools.
Yeah.
And people didn't even realize that it was gone. Senior district officials didn't realize it. We did a whole rally for recess in front of City Hall and before a board meeting. And so I say that to put this in the context as a larger public health issue, because I'm a community health worker. And we sometimes see this issue of suspension is like, oh, kids are being bad and they need to like listen, right? And not to say that kids don't have problematic behavior sometimes, but it's really been understanding the root causes of behavior and for us working towards change so we can create healthier and more supportive environments. And that's what our whole campaign has been here, solutions, not suspensions, right? Juwan Daniels, I was not involved in that time, but I've heard this story so many times and it just breaks my heart because these are literal life and death situations. This child was roaming the halls and was suspended, sent home, and shot and killed. That didn't need to happen. And there's so many other situations that didn't need to happen. And if my daughter, when she was young, and I had a really supportive teacher in school at that point where we were able to not only come up with a solution. Luckily, her kindergarten teacher was also a dance teacher and integrated a lot of movement to make sure that those kids could get up and move and call me and have a parent-teacher conversation. But we work with very small children. That was one of the pieces of our campaign. Do not suspend pre-K through third graders. What is a small child doing that is suspendable, right? Which was validated by the Attorney General's report. But this is all informed by our lived experiences and tracking with our own children and families and accompanying them through this process. And again, if my child hadn't had me, she didn't get suspended when she was small. But by the time she was a teenager and she wasn't getting her needs met, she was acting out. Mm-hmm. She was making sure that her needs were going to get met, right? And so this is what we need to do, is make sure that we understand the root causes of behavior, that this is a mental, emotional, and behavioral health issue. And we need to find ways where we can come up with more proactive restorative solutions to address these issues and not push kids out of school.
And I think also it became almost like the district culture. You know, just suspending kids without really looking for, solutions, suspending kids as if it was a solution. Yeah. And we were able to early on mobilize and get the policy change, get a new code of conduct. And so we thought by, getting the policy change that ultimately would lead to, a change in behavior. And we found out the hard way that because you put a policy on paper, don't change people's behavior.
It does not.
and that was a shock in itself. That was a big win to get the board to vote in place of. We have one of the best code of conducts in the state. And it just turned out to be that if people behavior don't change, that code of conduct is just words on paper. That's the significance of the AOD. The AOD means assurance of discontinuance. It means people were violating the law, and now they have to assure the Attorney General that they're going to discontinue to violate the law. You know what I'm saying? So it was a real validation that, first of all, the code of conduct went in the right direction, but it really required oversight and people to implement with fidelity.
And to your point, I think that is maybe one of the most alarming parts of this investigation is that the school district did engage in unlawful practices. That's daunting for both parents and students to hear that this educational system that we trust, they're violating processes, due process, inconsistent procedures, reports of retaliation were mentioned. I want to get into how this is impacting the individual household.
Yeah. Significantly on lots of levels, right? I mean, think about yourself as a parent. You're getting a call from the school. Sometimes one of the issues that was raised was, not unlawful suspensions, just sending kids home from school. So we had a lot of situations where something was happening in a school building, many times children with disabilities for behaviors that were protected under the law, and said, Johnny's having a bad day, maybe you should come pick him up and take him home, right? Sometimes even saying maybe you should keep him home for a couple days. That's excluding a child from home from school. You should not be doing that without documenting it. And we were having a lot of situations like that where a child was being excluded from school or sent home from school without it being logged as a suspension.
And I suspect a lot of people didn't even realize that is an unlawful suspension.
Right. So there's procedures and laws that need to be followed related to that. So that's kind of like the first layer, right? The second layer is a short-term suspension, which is anything from 1 to 5 days. And so that's to the principal's discretion, but they still, by law, need to send a notice home. That has to be given to the child, to the family, needs to be assured that the parent received it, and the child can't be excluded from school until the family receives that letter, which was regularly happening once again. Parents sometimes not even getting those suspension letters, just getting a call from the school. The parent also has a right to have a parent conference. That is stated in the letter, but a lot of times that wasn't happening. That's really up for the parent to know. And if a parent can negotiate something and say, like, I don't think this is right, and work through it, then the child needs to be returned to school. If the behavior was related to their disability, the child needs to be returned to school. A lot of times, though, by the time you can get this sorted out, parents are working, parents are dealing with other kids as well. A lot of times parents would just be like, all right, I'll just take it. I'll just pick my kid up from school, or I'll take the 1 to 5 day suspension. We also felt like usually those suspensions were being maxed out at 5 days, which the AOD also in the findings said those suspensions were usually at 5 days. If the principal could suspend up to 5 days, they were generally suspending 5 days, right? And then you go to the long-term suspensions, which are 6 days up to 180 days, a whole entire school year. And we've dealt with families who've been dealing with that, and those situations are so heartbreaking. I mean, missing 5 days of school is pretty significant in terms of getting set back, right? Because the kids are home, they're supposed to get alternate instruction, but very few of them are really getting that. It may be virtual, right? It's not the same as being in school.
Yeah, and you can lose a lot in a week.
Yes. So imagine if you're out of school for months to up to an entire year. And going into these suspension hearings, they happen at City Hall. The parent needs to be there for the suspension hearing to run. You have a hearing officer, which is an employee of the district that is quote unquote impartial. And it's like a court proceeding. So you're read your rights. You have a right to an attorney or an advocate. Most parents don't realize that, even though it's in the letter. There's all kind of issues. Like the average literacy level for our parents is a 3rd grade reading level. This is a legal document. This is a legal proceeding. So I remember the first time I was an advocate in a long-term suspension hearing. It was extremely intimidating. I didn't realize what I was walking into. And from there on out, if I was dealing with a family who was in a long-term suspension hearing, and this is where our community partnerships have been really helpful, I say get a lawyer. Because especially if it's certain charges, they can be very serious and exclude you up to school for an entire school year. So it's overwhelming in a lot of ways for parents to be managing this situation, the risk that's involved in terms of long-term exclusion from school, the way that it's set up, and the administrators and the witnesses are joining virtually. You're sitting in there with a hearing officer. You don't really know how to come and be prepared around this stuff. And you're pleading guilty, not guilty, or partially guilty. It's a very overwhelming experience. So I think just taking into account this whole system, and I would argue it's a system of oppression and a system of exclusion. And I think that the Attorney General showed that in terms of just the sheer volume of suspensions that were happening, the disparities around suspensions related to race and related to special education and disabilities, related to income. It's a system that needs to be dismantled from a punitive to a restorative system.
I want to delve deeper into those disparities and also, once again, building on the unlawful practices, especially this may be more tailored to you, Sam, in the years you've been doing this work. Some of the dire findings from this investigation also concluded that Black students were 6 times more likely than their white counterparts to be suspended. Latinos were 4 times as likely, and there was also a disproportionate rate of students with disabilities being suspended. These are groups who already, based on their race, ethnicity, and ability status, feel like they are others, so to speak, in the world because, when they're in school, they have this image of this is what I'm going to be entering into in society. What is this showing them that, there appears to be these targets just because of who they are demographically? What does that do to a student, and what does that tell them about the world they're entering into?
Yeah, it just reinforces all the stereotypes. I mean, at the end of the day, it tells a student, ultimately, when you look at the academic outcomes we got in the district, you know what I'm saying, they parallel that. You know what I'm saying? Basically, if you look at the academic outcomes for low-income people of color, students with disabilities, most students, we got less than 3 out of 10 students who are reading and writing and doing math on grade level, graduating college and career ready. Because at the end of the day, I mean, what's happening to you in the classroom, it could take away your just love for going to school or even wanting to be in school. And so consequently, we have a culture, first of all, if you just look at the demographics in the district, 84% of the teachers are white, 70% of them don't live, in the context of, where these children are coming from. And not necessarily say that that's a determinant factor, but the point is that cultural disconnect has an impact. And not to be to the point that Jessica made earlier, to not have a restorative process to where, at the end of the day, we're trying to get to the root cause of what's going on. To have a process where we're just trying to push kids out to get the problem from in front of us, kick it down the road. Really, I mean, it's discouraging. It's discouraging for parents. It's discouraging for students. And ultimately, you get that kind of outcomes we're getting academically and, socially, emotionally, and culturally in terms of what's going on in the district.
Right. And in looking at that representation of, like you said, not a lot of educators look like their students. I imagine it's like that in the realm of healthcare professionals or guidance counselors who may be available in those schools. The limited amount of resources that we do have to offer counseling, a lot of times they don't look like the Black student or the Latino student. They don't look like the disabled student. So what does that lack of representation across the board really mean in terms of playing into disciplinary actions?
Yeah, I think that there's disconnects. And when you look at suspension charges, right, because they need to be classified, that was one of our major issues as well, because they were charges like disrespect, insubordination, defiance of authority, which oftentimes are misunderstandings. And I have been involved in so many situations, parent conferences, suspension hearings, also training in restorative practices. So restorative conferencing where it's a relationship breakdown and it's a lack of understanding. It's something a child said or did because they weren't in a good place necessarily because they're still children, right? They do things that are impulsive. Some of the things that they're bringing from home may not be the things that the staff is dealing with, right? Just because the environments that our children are coming from. Sometimes things are cultural and it seems disrespectful to you, but that is just cultural, right? That's a different tone that we're using. It's a different way that we're presenting ourselves. And so assuming good intent and understanding like what might be going on underneath the surface here and having the understanding to even ask those questions, right? Like we use a practice where we do check-ins, like how are you doing today on a scale of 1 to 5? And you can even do it within a classroom context where the kids just raise their hand and put the number up. If you see that you've got, everybody's at a 4 or a 5, but you've got 1 or 2 kids at a 1 or a 2, and then they show an attitude towards you later, maybe there's something else going on there. It may not be personal, right? Mm-hmm. So just building those relationships and understanding we don't know what we don't know. And I think especially right now, there's always differences between generations, but we also have a youth community health worker program where we recruit young people, many of whom we've met when they have gotten in trouble in suspension hearings and whatnot, because they have this spirit about them. They are trying to express themselves in some way. They're trying to let us know what they need. They're trying to defend themselves or their peers, right? Sometimes not in the best possible way, but in the only way that they know how. And being able to understand that from a generational perspective, these are kids, right? And the environment they're living in sometimes is wild and they're not getting their needs met. And we're not adapting as adults sometimes and trying to meet them where they're at. And that's our job as adults, right? Because we're the adults. I think a lot of these dynamics are at play in a way that we don't have a system right now that's really, it's not working for the kids. It's not working for the adults either, right? Because I've heard a lot of teachers and administrators say, and we've got a lot that are allies too, as we talk about a lot of the problems, there are a lot of people who are trying, and we don't have the right infrastructure in place. And I think that's where the opportunity is here, because it is challenging with the tools that teachers and administrators have at their disposal right now to have a restorative approach, to have the time and energy to have a restorative conference, to bring people in who are of and from community that have context of where our families are coming from, to help address what happened. What were you thinking at the time? How can we make this right? It is an intensive process. It's more time and energy on the front end. It saves you a lot of time and energy and builds stronger relationships in the long run, but it's a real culture shift that I think we need to engage in.
That was Jessica Bauer Walker and Sam Radford. And we close with What's Next contributor Ekua Mends-Aidoo speaking with board chair Syntyia Taylor of Buffalo Black Nurses. The two discuss her journey into nursing and the misconception about nurse practitioners.
And so before we get into your work, I want to start with you. What drew you into nursing and specifically into adult and critical care?
To try to summarize this as easy as possible, because I want to say I was always drawn to healthcare, but probably didn't know exactly where I wanted to be. I think as kids, we're always like drawn towards like being a doctor. So that was always like number one. We don't talk about all the other roles that are available in healthcare. But as I started to kind of transition through life, I had the elders in my family and in the community start to become more like ill and sick, and going to appointments with family members. And it's like, I really didn't even know what I was doing. And trying to be a biology major at UB and going towards the pre-med route, I felt like I was more withdrawn from the bedside. So at that moment, I took some time to reflect on what I wanted to actually do. And I realized that as nurses, they got the opportunity to actually be at the bedside with their patients, know their patients, have more of like a personal relationship with them. At the same time, still understanding all the medical background and caring for them. And then I came to this realization that I didn't have to stop being a medical provider, that I can just keep going. And at that point, my end goal was always to become a nurse practitioner. How I ended up in adult was I at first thought that maybe I wanted to do labor and delivery, but as I started to transition and do clinical work, I realized that that's not where my calling was at. It's nice, that's the happy place, bringing babies, everything else, but I think when I realized like helping my community, helping others, it was more of the adults, the elderly. Those are the ones that fall in more to sickness, that need our care, that need someone to be more of a liaison in the community to help them navigate their way. And at that moment, I just fell in love with critical care and fell in love with that fast pace, the very sick, that high energy. And as I started my career off as a float nurse at Sisters, as an RN, I ended up going to critical care. I was there for about like 6-7 years as a charge nurse, going to school for my bachelor's, my master's. And when I was done and had my nurse practitioner, I ended up at Mercy in the neurology department, and then later went back for my acute care certification and went to critical care. So that's where I'm at now.
That, first of all, that's an amazing, career and journey. It sounds. That's a lot of work that it took to get there, right?
It was.
And so was there a moment when you knew this was more than a job for you?
Oh, yes. I want to say there was a time where I was actually working and I see this patient all the time from there. So I think that's like my one like go-to moment that I could think of. But I was working in a mother baby because I was a float, and I would just go where the need was at. You showed up, you didn't know where you're going to be at that day. Your assignment was given to you where the need was at and where you were trained. And I was there a mother baby with a mom who was pregnant with twins, and she ended up losing one. And she was there for like antepartum where they have to stay the whole time for like the rest of their pregnancy. And at that point, she was still like preterm. So she was stuck in the hospital for weeks on end. And I became like really close with her in those couple of weeks because she was already going through such a traumatic time in her life. And that sometimes you question like, what can I do for this person or what am I doing? But just being there for her, like caring for her, notifying the doctors of any change and so forth. She did go on to birth that healthy baby. And every time I see her in the community, we always catch up and I have to see the pictures and everything. But it was like that moment where I still was like a brand new, like novice nurse and I was unsure of myself. I think that solidified, like, no, I'm right where I need to be at. And this is exactly what I want to do. I just had to find kind of where my niche was at. And I still didn't know at that moment.
I absolutely love that. And so you're dual certified,
yes.
right? And deeply involved in mentoring others.
Yes.
So what do you think people often misunderstand about, what nurses, especially nurse practitioners, actually do?
So I get this all the time because I think a lot of times you know, when you say nurses, everyone just puts nurses in one category, like, oh, you're a nurse and that's it. I'm always going to be a nurse, first and foremost. You have to be a registered nurse to be a nurse practitioner. So I'm always a nurse at heart. I already have those skills at the bedside. That is what shaped and molded me for the background for everything that I kind of do in my career. But I think when it comes to nurse practitioners, a lot of time we are misrepresented, I think, by people, because when they go to their doctors, a lot of time, because of the shortage with medical providers, they don't even see their physician. A lot of times people go to a clinic and they don't even know who the actual attending or the physician that's over the whole clinic. They know their nurse practitioner. They know their PA, their physician assistant. That's who they know. Like, they follow them for years and they're always quick to say their name and never anyone else. And they're like, oh, my doctor. We're not an actual medical physician or a doctor of medicine. We are at least a master's prepared advanced nurse practitioner. And then some of us do go on to get our doctorates. I don't. I have a master's and I have a postmaster, but we treat, we diagnose, we do basically everything else that the doctor does. But I think that, and not saying think, but I know that our way of caring still comes from that, like, nursing model. So a lot of times we're more personable, we're not dismissive, and a lot of, you know, patients will prefer to see their nurse practitioner than their doctors. And it's the same thing in the hospital where I'm at. You know, this doctor may walk in for a few minutes, assess them, see them, and go, okay, do you have any questions? Because basically I've done everything for the day.
Right.
You know, and I've already collaborated with them, and they're like, okay, good. And I'm the one that's taking care of them, really. You know, that I just go to my physician if there's any, you know, questions or concerns.
Yeah. And so, you know, I want to talk a little bit about the lived reality of nursing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we often hear about burnout in healthcare and how difficult that is. But from your perspective on the ground, what is the reality for nursing right now?
I would say that burnout is real. As I'm looking, there's probably about 20 of us all together in this ICU. And that's like, it's hard to just say from the nursing perspective because there's nurse practitioners and there's PAs where I'm what they kind of consider advanced practice practitioners or mid-levels. But through those nurses, if I had to kind of say, let's take like half of those, and those are nurses, the burnout can be real. The jobs can be very demanding. I don't think that not only do people understand that it is like long hours, long shifts. Sometimes you're taking the work home with you. You're finishing your admin. You're doing your charting. You're doing things like that. But then it's the emotional strain and the stress that I think people don't understand. Every day, you're not only trying to keep your own mental together, but you're dealing with patients and families when they're at their lowest, and people are coming to terms that they're in a life, or their family member or their loved one is at end of life. And you're also keeping it professional, giving them all the care that they need and all the answers, and you're working so hard on this patient, and sometimes you still come away with, no matter what you've done, that we still lose this patient. And that fast pace, that burnout, not having a lot of resources, not having the nursing staff underneath us to care for these patients, and then that even goes down to our CNAs and our assistants, that it kind of trickles all the way up the ladder, that we take on more responsibility. We're doing more. Not only are we doing all the prognosis, the testing, the treating, and then we're also at the bedside putting on bedpans on people and doing this and doing that. And after some time, it's not only taxing on the mind, because you're constantly thinking, you're like critically thinking, over analyzing everything, but then at the same time, you're physically exhausted. Mm-hmm. You're at burnout. Mm-hmm. And I think that is recognizing it before you get there. And I think that's what a lot of nurses don't do. They work until they hit that burnout, till they hit that brick wall. And then there's like that love for nursing is gone, that compassion is gone, and we kind of forget the reason why we even got into nursing in the first place. Now we put our own mental health first, and a lot of people are switching from the bedside, and they're leaving, and they're going to other positions like at insurance companies and kind of telemedicine, things like that, where they're kind of far and remove themselves from the bedside. And we are seeing it because we just keep losing nurses year after year.
Wow. Yeah. And I think, you know, and thinking about the last few years, even
COVID,
you know, we're seeing increase in, you know, upper respiratory things that are happening. The flu that's been, you know, really horrible.
It was horrible this season.
This season, right? And so how has the last few years really reshaped the profession, not just logistically, but emotionally? What doesn't show up in the headlines?
I want to say, you know, we hear about the burnout, but I think that they don't actually look at the lack of nurses that we have. They're not looking at the numbers. Before 2020 happened, which is funny, we were all like in school and they had this like nursing model that was like about like nursing 2020. And it always talked about that there was going to be this mass shortage then. And we're like, why? Like, what's happening? Like, if you looked at the statistics, the schools were putting out so many nurses, nurse practitioners, everything that we're like, we don't see where this is coming from. I don't think anyone predicted they were going to throw a pandemic in there and then that burnout happened and everybody like just left the bedside. So when we talk about that burnout, when we talk about that nursing shortage, there are some programs out there that are trying to still kind of just make the nursing field look enticing so that people will want to go into it. Like, hey, we have free tuition in some programs and everything else, but you will be surprised that the enrollment is still down, that these classes are not full to capacity, and also is not for everyone. So even though you may start off with 100 nursing students, by the end, you're like probably only making or producing 40 of those nursing students at the end that actually go through with it and take their boards and are ready to work. So it's so discouraging. And then I think to tell us that, you know, our nursing providers, as far as like nurse practitioners, that we can't get the professional title anymore for reimbursement for our loans and tuition now is going to be even a more devastating shortage than what there was before.
I'm so glad you brought that up because, you know, obviously that's a new conversation that's happening in the current administration. And so talk a little bit about that, right? Like, you know, these are things that we hear in the headlines, you know, now this isn't going to be recognized as a professional degree, what that means as it relates to tuition. So give us a little insight on that.
Yes, there is a certain cap that you are able to take as a grad student. And so there are levels when it comes to these degrees of grad students, and some of them are recognized as these professional degrees. That's like your nurse practitioner, your physician assistant, and there's some others, but just pertaining to this. But they allow you to take out more of I want to say tuition costs and loans and so forth. By removing that title of being a professional, now you're capping how much people can take out, or these students can take out, which they're now going to either be dependent or reliable of either their own savings and what they have, personal loans, and not everyone we know probably their credit or could afford to do that, or they're dependent on if they have money saved or family paying for it. And a lot of students, I would say, as in my journey, they've all been dependent. I want to say majority of the class, we've all were dependent on taking out our loans ourselves. We did not have family paying our tuition. We didn't have savings up. We are usually someone that started off as the RN, and we said, you know what, we're going back to school. And we worked our own way up. And that's like, I speak truth of that because I did it myself too. So without having the ability to take out those loans, to be able to go to school and fund my own education, I don't know that I will be sitting here. I really wouldn't be sitting here, to be totally honest.
We're talking about a shortage now, right? And so something like this could potentially increase what that shortage is going to,
I believe if we don't do something to change it, it's going to increase the shortage. And then we're going to be right back talking about burnout, because you can't now expect the same few nurse practitioners or nurses now to take on more roles, because they still have to be done, and breaking down that role of maybe just missing like 2 nurses, but that then role has to be absorbed into other nurses' daily functions. And so you ask that one nurse now to, hey, can you do this now? Can you do that now? And eventually the burnout is going to be there. And that's what's happening.
Right. I want to shift a little bit and talk about race representation, and specifically, you know, you're a part of Buffalo Black nurses, but why is representation in nursing and healthcare more broadly so critical?
I got to chill as soon as you said that, because I am the only black nurse practitioner, at my hospital. That's just it. It's me.
One.
Wow. We have a huge hospital system. And when you look around and, I see other nurses, RNs, and we see all of our secretaries, our nursing assistants, dietary, environmental services, all of those. It's like they are so saturated with the African-American population, but once you start going up that corporate ladder and going into more of like the professionals and the med staff and looking at nurse practitioners, physician assistants, physicians, it's like you can basically count them all on one hand. So this kind of goes into this whole, I want to say, population almost in Buffalo, because I also work at another health system as well. And there, too, I'm like one of the only mid-levels that's African-American. But when you look around, the population that they're taking care of, the population that is critically ill, they're African-American. A lot of times, they don't even understand that our illnesses, our symptoms, the way we understand things, the way, because of our heritage and our roots, the way we treat things, the way we throw a little bit of our own, non-medical, care into it is completely different.
And that will do it for this episode. We thank our host and guest. If you missed anything and want to hear it again, you can get this program as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts. This has been What's Next from Buffalo Toronto Public Media.
Support for the BTPM NPR What's Next podcast comes from Health Foundation for Western and Central New York, partnering with the community to pursue racial and socioeconomic health equity. Learn more at hfwcny.org.